Okay, now we're going to do the second part of proving triangles congruent. We're going to talk about how triangles are congruent. So here are the 5 different theorems and postulates that we are going to use to prove triangles congruent. The first one is side, side, side. So that one's easy because it's just all 3 sides. The next one is side, angle, side. That one where your angle has to be in between your two sides. So if you see, let's do highlighting here. So here's one side, here's the other side, your angle is in the middle. If your angle is not in the middle, so if you see R and U are the ones that are being tick marked, if they are not in the middle, that means that they are not congruent, because we would then say it would be SSA or ASS. And how I say it is you cannot swear or swear backwards in math class. So in geometry, we cannot swear or swear backwards, so it has to be side angle side, not side side angle or angle side side. That doesn't work. Alright, the next one is RHL. This is going to be the one way that we can say that it's swearing, but we don't call it swearing. We call it RHL. Think about right angles, or right triangles. So you need a right triangle, you need a hypotenuse, and you need a leg. So hypotenuse, remember, is opposite the right angle. So that's your double tick mark here. And then you need a leg. So it could be either leg, it doesn't matter. I just choose that one right now, and it has to be a right angle. Okay? So that's your RHL. The other two are angle, side, angle. Just like the side, angle, side, now your side has to be sandwiched. So if I do your side, if you look, your angle is on either side of your side. So on both sides of your side, that's going to be angle, side, angle. It's sandwiched. Now angle, angle, side is when it's not sandwiched. So that one, it's going to be a completely different way to prove a triangle is congruent. So, alright, to recap, we have side, 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 all sides. We have side, angle, side, where your angle is sandwiched in between your two sides. And remember, we cannot swear or swear backwards. We have RHL, so that's going to be your oddball one. It has right angles, hypotenuse, and a leg. Angle, side, angle, where your side is sandwiched between your two angles. And then we have angle, angle, side, where your side here is not sandwiched by your two angles. So now let's practice those 5. So I wrote those 5 up at the top. So let's see if you could go through, put in extra tick marks. So what I mean by extra tick marks is if you look at A, I also have vertical angles. So you have vertical. B, you have reflexive. Could be an additional tick mark. So look for vertical or reflexive. Those are the 2 things that you can add in to all of these pictures. You will probably have to add them in on most. And then write down what the following shortcuts. Side, 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 angle, side, RHL, ASA, AAS. And then check them with mine. Okay, so here is all of mine. The first one was there to trick you. It was an angle, 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 which is not a shortcut, so they're not congruent. The next one is going to be angle, angle, side, because your side is not sandwiched. There's 2 angles in a side, so that means 2 angles in a side means it's one of these last 2, but it's not sandwiched, so it has to be angle, angle, side. Now this one, if you look, your side, so if I highlight my side, your angles are on either side, so that means it is sandwiched, so it's angle, side, angle. Part D was you already knew that these 2 were congruent and these 2 were congruent. So you know 8s are congruent and 9s are congruent, and then the middle is a reflexive, so that would be side, side, side. D, I could put in vertical, so that means your two sides have an angle in between them, so that's side angle side. We have a reflexive in the middle on E, so that means it's side, side, side. This one, you have your angles are congruent, the 5s are congruent, and the 4s. So that means it's side angle side. Your two angles, your two sides, I should say, are sandwiched that angle. So the angle is in the middle between your two sides. Part G, we have side, side, side. It's all three sides. Side, side, side is probably the easiest one to remember. And then H, we have angle, side, angle. So if we look, this right here, your angles are sandwiched on either side of your side. So that's why it's ASA and not AAS. Now we are going to do some actual proofs. And these might be a little bit different than what your teacher teaches you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the first given. And I never write down more than one given. After I write down a given, I use it, if I can. So I write down FJ is congruent to HJ. And I mark up my picture to make sure that I have the tick marks there. They were already there, but I just put them over the tick mark just to get in the habit of doing that. And then I write down my next given because I can't really do anything else. G is the midpoint of FH. And that is a given. Now, oops, not a 2. Now, when I look at my picture, I see G is the midpoint of FH. Now, what I have my students look for is keywords. The keyword is midpoint. So, going back to a few modules ago, we talked about intro to proofs and how we write if-then statements. If midpoint, this is where they're coming in. So I start with my keyword. My keyword is midpoint. If midpoint, then, and if you remember the definition, it says two congruent segments. So I look at my picture and what two congruent segments are they? Well, that would be FG and GH, if G is the midpoint of FH. Now, the two congruent segments are what I put for my statement. FG is congruent to GH. And then that means I need one more step. Whenever you prove triangles congruent, you have to have three things congruent. So if I look, I have 1 and I have 2. So I need one more congruent sign. So if I look at my picture, I look in the middle. Oh, look at that. GJ, or JG, is congruent to JG. And that is reflexive. POC, because it's congruent to itself. And now that is my third congruent sign. So now I can state that my triangles are congruent. FGJ is congruent to triangle HJG. Now, and I just used my proof statement. This will always be the last statement in your proof. Now I look at my picture. Now I have to figure out what is one of the 5 shortcuts. Well, I see 3 sides, so it's going to be side, side, side. So that is my first proof. Now, if you guys want to start this proof, write your couple givens, write what, if you can find one other step to do, that'd be great, and then we will go from there. Okay, so I filled it mostly in, first of all with my 2 givens, and I put tick marks on my picture. And then just because I know there's one extra step, and then I have my congruent sign. So I have 2 congruent sign, so I need one more. So I look at my picture and I look, whenever I'm stuck, I look in the middle. So if I see that it comes to a point, I see these angles. And if you remember from a couple chapters ago, we talked about vertical angles. So angle KNJ is congruent to angle MNL, and that's if vertical, then congruent. And that's how I shorten if two angles are vertical angles, then they are congruent. I just say if vertical, then congruent. Now I look at my picture and I figure out what my shortcut is. I have two sides and an angle. And if I look at my picture or my statements, here are my two sides, and the third one is my angle. So two sides and an angle has to be side angle side, because side angle, remember I can't swear, so that doesn't work. So is your angle sandwiched in between your two sides? Yes. So it'd be side angle side. So there's my second proof. Alright, so now we have a few more. So I have two. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to talk about the first one, and then I'm going to have you do the next three. And then you can just check your answers and we can kind of go through how I got the different steps. So write down your first two givens and then we will talk about it. So pause it, write down your givens, see if you can write down one extra step. Okay, so I wrote down my first two givens and I noticed that I had a keyword of bisect. So then I say if bisect then, and I say two congruent, but now I have to look. What is it being bisected? So this right here is an angle, so I want two congruent angles. So JK and NK are already shown, and it says JKN. So JKN is this whole angle, and it's being bisected. So that means that this angle is going to be congruent to this angle. It's being cut in half by AK. So that means angle JKA is congruent to angle NKA. And then we need one more thing, because if you look, I only see two congruent signs. So just because our last couple proofs were 4-step proofs doesn't mean this one will be. So you just got to keep that in mind. So if I look in the middle, oh look, I see a side. So that's AK is congruent to AK. And that would be reflexive POC. So that would make my triangle congruent by side angle side. I have two sides and an angle, and my angle is in the middle, so it's side angle side. Alright, I want you to do the next one, and then we'll go to the next page and you can do the next two there. Okay, so here's my proof. I wrote down my first two givens and I marked it up on my picture, and then I saw bisect. So then my next step, that's my key word. So if bisect, then two congruent, and the reason why I did angles was because it says angle right here. It bisected an angle. So then I look at my picture and it says BCD is being bisected by CF. So that means that these two angles up at the top are going to be congruent. So naming them, C has to be in the middle. So it would be BCF and DCF. Naming angles is one of the hardest things in geometry. It comes up throughout the whole year. The next one, if I look in the middle, I see they share a side. So that means CF is congruent to CF by reflexive. And then I have two angles and a side, and the side is not in the middle of the two angles, so it's angle, angle, side. On this page, two on this page. Now we have two other proofs. one is partially done for you and the other one is not at all. The second one uses parallel lines, so you're going to have to use some knowledge from the previous chapter of parallel lines in this one. So you try these two and then we can check it with mine. Alright, so here are my two proofs. The first one was a side, 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 so it was on the easier side. So you put in your given, I put in my second statement, my next given, and then if midpoint, then two congruent segments. So I look at my picture, and D is the midpoint of AC, so then it would be AD and DC would be congruent, and that's my third statement. Already was written for you was the reflexive, so then you just have to realize BD is congruent to BD by reflexive, POC. And then your last one was the side, 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 because it was all three sides. This next one could have gone a few different ways. When you say that the lines are parallel, so I look at these two lines, and then I look at one transversal. And what I did is I looked at this one. And if I always say that the corners of my Z are my alternate interior angles. So if I look at my Z, which is right here, the corners of that Z are my alternate interior angles. Well, I could also have looked at this Z and done C and C, D and C, sorry. Could have been the congruent angles as well. So either way could have worked, or you could have done both. And if you would have done both, that would have been fine as well. So then I noticed that my next given, so I wrote down that one, and then you had vertical. If you did both alternate interior angles, you would not have done the vertical. So that would have been the either one, because then you would have had, I would have had a congruent here, and then you would have also had another alternate interior angles, or you could have done the vertical. And either one would have been correct, and then you would have had angle, side, angle. A few of you might have done angle, side, angle if you would have done D and C instead. So if you would have, in the vertical. So if you would have done that, that would have been angle, side, angle. So proofs, you can do a lot of correct ways and a lot of incorrect ways, but a lot of correct ways could be correct. So try the activity, try the worksheet, and then there's a quiz that you can do. Good luck.